All right, everybody, welcome back to the Contrarians. Here we have yet another Patreon voted on topic. We're going to talk about the heaviest hair metal songs, specifically our favorite hair metal songs that just kick ass. There are a lot of them out there. I expect to hear a good variety. But before we do that, I want to take just a minute. Martin, would you mind telling the people what your personal definition of hair metal is as opposed to other varieties of metal?
Well, okay, so I always think hair metal. For me, the light bulb went off when I heard the original Career Records import version of the first Dokken album, which goes back to 1981. And I just remember thinking, "Wow, good singing, good production, hooks. This is kind of interesting, kind of cool. What's going on here?" And then, so we had the new wave of British heavy metal, all that. I've often said that Brian, I did a podcast episodes of my History in Five Songs thing that was called Lars Ulrich Invented Hair Metal. And what I meant by that is that Lars and Brian Slagle and John Strednansky and Bob Nalbandian and all these journalists and these very enthusiastic musicians were all loving this whole new wave of British heavy metal thing. So they're bringing metal to LA kind of in a big way. There are these bubbling under, guitar shredder types, but there's really not a lot of great rock going on in a big way. But Brian Slagle, by bringing in all these imports at Oz Records and then starting Metal Blade and putting out those samplers, Black and Blue is on a Metal Massacre, Rad is on a Metal Massacre. There's general metal on there. There's some thrash. There's some hair. So I think those super fans kicked off a new metal revolution there, and the music is an evolution from the new wave of British heavy metal. And then someone showed up in London and just turned the lights off. It was over. 1983, 1984, it just goes off a cliff. Everything, the fulcrum shift goes over to LA, and yeah, so it's essentially, somewhat glammy looking, not really like early UK glam. That's almost a whole different thing. But this androgynous look that's more of a Hanoi Rocks, New York Dolls thing, and just a heavy metal style that has more hooks in it, better production, maybe singers that technically usually sing higher, good vocals. 80s drum sounds start kicking in, shredder guitarists, so you got guitar heroes, and it just becomes a semi homogeneous music, because almost all of it's being made within a few blocks of the Sunset Strip or whatever, or a few dozen miles of there. Put it that way. It's a big area, but
Right.
it's the entire scene essentially happens in Los Angeles.
Right. Everybody meeting each other at the rainbow and the whiskey and all of that. Okay. All right. There's some foundation for us. So, Alex, let's start with you. Give us your five favorite heavy hair metal tracks.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with an early band in this movement, and that's Great White. And you would say, they were kind of light and fluffy later on. This is a heavy, heavy record. My track off of this is On Your Knees, which is co-written by Don Dokken. And, you hear this and you don't think Once Bitten, Twice Shy at all. So they kind of came out the gate and right away, heavy, and then got much later. So that's one. Two, to me, the poster child of this is Skid Row and Slave to the Grind. Again, a heavy, heavy record. I could pick multiple songs off of this. I'll go with Slave to the Grind. I just think that's an incredible song. I mean, it shows power in Sebastian Bach's vocals. Guitar work is great. It's just, again, you don't think 18 in Life when you hear that song, right? This is just an in-your-face rock and roll song. So that's two. I think one that gets overlooked and is right there with Slave to the Grind is the fourth studio album from LA Guns. And this is, I put it like Slave to the Grind. This is a heavy record. This is not Ballad of Jane. Multiple tracks on here I could pick, but I will go with the first one, Face Down. I think Phil Lewis has a snarl and an aggression to his vocals that you didn't hear in the past. He drops a couple of F-bombs, not exactly your usual hair metal lyrics. So that's what I would say. If you kind of lost interest or kind of just went away from LA Guns after the first couple and wanted something heavier, definitely check that one out. I'm going to bring up Poison. And this was their fourth album. This was a struggle because Poison does not really have anything heavy, but in this case, they tried. This is 1993. Richie Cottons comes in for the first time, replacing CC DeVille. There's a song in here called The Scream, which if you listen to this, you may say, well, that's not the heaviest song, but for Poison, it's a heavy song. So I give them credit for, and it's a good song, but it's for sure, not only an outlier on this album, but I would say outlier in their career. And then I'm going to bring up a band that Martin and I worship, and that's Love Hate. And while I love the first two albums, I prefer Blackout. I know, Martin, you like Wasted, but both are great. Their third album is in your face the whole way through. I'll just go with the first track, Let's Rumble. That sounds like if you're getting ready to go out to a bar and you want to start a fight, put that track on. It's going to get you pumped up, going to get you in the mood. It's aggressive. Jizzy, comes full force with the vocals. I think it's a classic. So that's my quick five.
Okay.
Nice. Good
I wonder
job.
how many bands Jizzy Pearl has sung for now? That guy's in seemingly everything. He's touring with Quiet Riot right
Quiet
now.
Riot, LA Guns, Adler's Appetite. Yeah.
Actually got to see him when the Dio hologram was going around. He actually opened up, but it was Jizzy Pearl, but he did like a lot of the Love Hate stuff, and it was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always liked them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Alex, thanks for getting us started off. I liked that.
Thank you.
Let's check it out. Let's go to Germany. Oliver.
Yeah.
Let's get a European perspective on heavy hair metal.
Yeah, my European perspective is very North American because I said let's keep it between 1983 and 1990 because that to me is the main period. Slave to the Grind is a very heavy record, but to me it's Skid Row trying not to be hair metal anymore. So for me it was out of the whatever. And I struggled with this topic. I signed on thinking, yeah, that's cool, but without any real ideas. And then I tried to pick something and I thought, well, is it me or is hair metal just not that heavy? I was really struggling. There were a lot of songs that I thought were heavy and then the chorus kicked in. It was all party hardy and stuff
Very
like
true.
that.
Yep.
And I think all the hair metal bands from 88 onwards are none of them are really heavy. Danger, Bo Nasty, whatever Bullet Boys, stuff like that. Yeah. But I managed to pick some. I take my fave first. It's the first song from the debut album from Cinderella, Night Songs.
Yeah.
Super heavy song, very slow. I love Tom Kiefer's voice. He has this hair metal screech, but it's really ferocious. Way heavier than other singers with this kind of range. And but it's really their only album I would consider really heavy because after that they went way more bluesy and so this is my fave and the first song is kick-ass. Second band, because I think maybe no one will mention it. It's a band I hear very seldom of. I think they're pretty cool. It's Dangerous Toys. I chose one song from their first album, Bones in the Gutter. The album is also not that heavy, but it's a rougher rock and roll song. Sometimes they're a bit funky. But I think it's a really cool debut album, underrated, underappreciated band, and Bones in the Gutter is pretty heavy as well. Next one. Actually, I thought, if I'm not gonna find anything, I'll just pick some songs of the first Wasp album. But then I listened to the first Wasp album and thought, well, the heaviest thing on it is the song title "Fuck Like a Beast." So that's an honorable mention maybe, but all in all, I don't think that album is heavy. It tries to be there. Obviously, the titles almost sound like thrash. There's a tormentor, the torture never stops, on your knees, stuff like that. But then you listen to it and it's not that heavy. So no Wasp for me. But then another band surprised me because I didn't remember them as being that heavy. But Dokken have some really heavy songs. Obvious Pick, Tooth and Nail, the title track from this one. And there's another one on this one. Let me check. Yeah, When Heaven Comes Down, also very heavy. That's 4. And another one, I think, Martin, you mentioned this as a start-off point for hair metal in the Kiss top 10 Kiss songs, and it's from Lick It Up, the opener, Exciter, which is also pretty heavy, I think. Even when I think Paul Stanley kind of softens it up a bit with his sexy voice, but Exciter is still one of their heavier songs. So that would be my first 5.
Nice.
Very good.
Good stuff.
I love Exciter. I love the is it Rick Derringer who does the solo on Exciter?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great track. All right, Martin, let's hear your first 5.
Yeah, I think we're all thinking along the same lines here, and it's hilarious that I also went through some Dangerous Toys and picked out Bones in the Gutter. I got 3 pages of stuff here. I'll explain why in a second, but and I also pointed out Tooth and Nail as well. And yeah, Alex, Great White, I was looking at them, and I had Out of the Night, Stick It, Bad Boys, Nightmares from those guys as well. Doc and I had Lost Behind the Wall. So the way I treated this, so I made about a page worth of examples. I had about 15 examples, but then I realized I had a History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff episode called Hair Metal OTT, I think, OTT Hair Metal Songs. And I went and found all these super fast double bass songs, and I copied a bunch of that into my doc, so I ended up with 3 pages of stuff here. But of course, I won't go there. But I will treat this like a History in 5 Songs, and then like sort of point out some themes here. That, I mean, we call it hair metal because it is heavy. I mean, it's generally speaking, it's hard rock with a lot of riffs and stuff. So first, and I wanted to keep these bands fairly famous to push us, like you guys picking out Poison and stuff like that, to push us to realize that some of these bands are pretty heavy. And one of them is Whitesnake. And Whitesnake, Still of the Night, and definitely Bad Boys from that album. I mean, we think of the power ballads with that band, but I went through a whole bunch of hair metal stuff, and I don't know if there's a heavier production than that Whitesnake album across all of hair metal. It is brutally distorted and low end and noisy. It is quite harsh and extreme for an album that sold, I think it's 8 million copies. It was just such a huge album. So I wanted to point that out for that end of it. I went to Twisted Sister and picked out, we know that the first album's the heaviest, but I picked out Burn in Hell, and then, maybe as a tandem track, something like Shout at the Devil, to show that there can be dark themes in this stuff as well. And both of those, one's up tempo and one's slower. So to do the slow part of it, something that's a little on the obscure side. I just really love this band. I think they did a really good job. Spread Eagle from Boston, Broken City, which is kind of a big wall of sound. But I picked this, there we go, to represent extreme singing. Pete Pardo and I were talking this morning about how AC/DC in 1980 with Back in Black was considered a heavy metal band. And I think one of the main reasons is Brian Johnson has a very extreme voice. So there are various ways to be heavy. And I think extreme singing is one of the ways. Let's see. I just circled a bunch of stuff here. It's a little chaotic, but let's go with, let's just mention Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses with something like Right Next Door to Hell or Perfect Crime, or even It's So Easy, You're Crazy, Double Talk and Jive, You Could Be Mine. This is a band that can sound heavy just because there's sort of an aggression and a chaos in the guitar sound. And we know there's a heaviness to the vibes and the emotions around this band. And Axl has an extreme voice. So they have a lot of things put together. They don't have that low bottom end, and they don't have particularly sinister sounding slow songs. I was going to do a whole podcast episode on hair metal doom songs. But I actually couldn't find very many. But I definitely think there's a lot of heavy hair metal songs. And okay, well, I'll do one more. I don't know what I'm at, but definitely to represent the idea of that entire podcast episode with OTT double bass drum. It comes from Van Halen, Get Up, and the David Lee Roth solo album, and from the new wave of British heavy metal. But there are these wall of sound, sort of double bass drum, histrionic sounds, and that's a form of heavy as well. So let's see, what could we mention as one of those? Quiet Riots, Scream and Shout, Europe, Scream of Anger, Black and Blue, Autoblast, Pantera songs, Ride My Rocket, Out for Blood. This is all kind of this from this episode I did, Motley Crue, Red Hot. So that's another way to be heavy, is just be double bass drum and crazy guitar soloing and fast. Fast is always equated with heavy. So yeah, I think I covered some themes there. Production, slow and heavy, fast and heavy, shredding, extreme vocals.
Okay. Love it. Very systematic. And we may have a few thoughts that overlap there when we get to my turn. But first, we're going to go down to Elder. Elder of Rock. I know you've got some bands for us. What are your first top 5?
All right. This is wild because Alex and I just did a show a couple days ago called Forgotten 80s Metal. And a lot of these bands I'm going to talk about now were in that episode. So, and the first one is going to be a band called Seduce. They were in the movie Decline of Western Civilization, the metal years. And the song on here, Crash Landing, which they played in that movie, is a really good, heavy tune. Got a great riff, just got some great drumming, some driving drumming, and great lyrics. And it's about a plane crash. So that's my first one. My next one is going to be this band, Keel. And I'm going to, it was hard for me to choose between Back to the City and Get Down, but I think I'm going to choose Back to the City. But they're both great heavy tunes. Back to the City is a little bit more faster, but Get Down's got a great, it's almost like All Hell's Breaking Loose or I Love It Loud or something. And it was produced by Gene Simmons, so that makes sense. My next one's going to be TNT. This is going to be the song Tell No Tales, the very last song. Great. It's almost a thrash song. It's got a great shredding riff by Ronnie Latecro on it, and Tony Harnell's screaming up real high on that one. And well, how many was that? Was that 4 or 3?
I think that was 3.
Okay, 3. The next one I'm gonna do is Rat. This is off I don't have the original album, but it's on Dancing Undercover, but I'm going with Body Talk. It's got a great double bass going, like Martin was talking about, some crazy guitar going. And it was also in the movie Golden Child. So if you ever see that movie and you're watching that, you think things are sounding familiar.
Oh, we're going to lose Elder.
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah, your picture's frozen.
I just got to restart my camera here. Hold on. Oh, I can still do it, I guess. And then my next one would be this is a band that started out. Martin mentioned them already. There you go. Okay, and yeah, they became heavier in their later years, but they started out kind of hair metal, but they still had some heavy songs. I'm going to go with Valhalla off of this one. This was, I think, harbinger of things to come with this band. It's got a great guitar riff. It just gets super heavy, double bass, and all that stuff. And interestingly enough, though, they did redo a song off here on their next album, Power Metal, Down Below. They did redo with Phil on vocals. So there you go. So that's my 5.
Nice. Good job.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to take a slightly different path because that's my job on the Contrarians. So I view hair metal as starting in 1986. So bear with me on this. Until then, what you really have, the dominant force in popular music, at least in America, is the birth of MTV. So you've got all of these bands that are just kind of figuring it out. You have what you might call proto hair metal. But to me, like the early Twisted Sister, you know, Dee Snider's not trying to look glam. He may be wearing women's clothing, but he's trying to look disturbing and scary, right? If you go back to the days when Motley Crue had like weird little makeup, they weren't trying to be androgynous. They were trying to be aggressive looking and scary. So even like early Rat, now that's a borderline case, but at the time, I know all of my friends who listened to heavy music, we just called that heavy metal. Nobody was segregating that off from other forms of music. Maybe if you were in like LA or San Francisco where they had a hardcore and thrash scene coming up, but I think most of us just threw all of that in the same pot. It didn't matter if it was Scorpions or Accept or Kiss. It was all just heavy metal. Where it really solidifies and becomes a genre for me is in 1986 when Poison released Look What the Cat Dragged In. So that's the album. You look at, I don't own that album, so I can't hold it up, but everybody probably knows what it looks like. The four guys on the front might as well be women. It could be a makeup ad. In fact, I had at least one friend who was like, hey, these chicks are pretty hot. That's not even a joke. It was just a completely new image. And this, I think, is when bands really figured it out and combined that glam look for MTV with the music. And that, to me, is hair metal, is when you've got an image that's as important as the music. And it's how they looked is what got them in the videos. Now, that doesn't mean that bands didn't become hair metal. So Rat 1983, to me, not hair metal. Rat 1988, definitely hair metal. If you look at these guys, you look up images, even Y&T, look up a picture of Y&T in 1983 and in 1986. And in 1986, they're wearing clown outfits. I mean, it's crazy how extreme that glam look had gotten.
Yeah.
So my point here is I started at 1986, and then I kind of go to 1991 when grunge kicks in. But you get some edge cases because towards the end, bands start trying to isolate themselves from that really glam image. And I think of it as they move from spandex to leather pants. So you have a lot of these leather pants hair bands. And I'm starting off with my favorite two leather pants hair bands, the first being Blue Murder. So Martin already mentioned John Sykes may have been the heaviest guitarist of the hair metal era. First with Whitesnake and then in Blue Murder. I love that first Blue Murder album. You could pick a lot of songs off of it. But I'm going with Ptolemy, a song that is it's kind of a throwback to early 80s metal because he's singing about ancient Egypt and this guy finding a map to lead him to treasure. And it's got like a video where a guy's like in a Moroccan market or at least a mock-up of a Moroccan market. Try saying that 4 times fast. And it's got these really super it's got this incredibly heavy riff, and yet he's screaming over the top of it, and it has this really melodic end section. Fantastic. I think that if you look at the videos, you have to throw these guys in with hair metal. They've all got poodle hair, but they're wearing like pirate shirts and leather trousers, right? So Blue Murder, Ptolemy is my first one. My second, coincidentally or not, I don't know, maybe it's just something in the water, came out the same year, and that's going to be Badlands from 1989's self-titled Badlands. I didn't grab any of my CDs here for visual aids. Oh, wow. So I'm specifically going with the song Devil Stomp, which I think has one of the most awesome riffs that Jake E. Lee ever came up with. And it kind of starts off slow and bluesy, but then it goes into this fantastic riff. And I have a memory of seeing Badlands live. It was an album or a tour that they did with, I know it was Great White, and I think it was Tesla. It was a 3-band tour. And Jake E. Lee started playing Devil Stomp, and Ray Gillen started singing in a different song. And they stopped and had a shouting match on stage, like right in the middle of the song. and Ray Gillen ripped the set list where it had been taped down on the floor, and he leans over and rips down the set list, and he's going like this in Jake's face. It was very rock and roll. Did kind of ruin my favorite song, but I thought it was a funny moment. Next, I wanted to show that even the hairiest of hair metal bands could be heavy once in a while. We're going to Warrant's second album and the song Uncle Tom's Cabin. And man, I remember the first time I heard this on the radio, and I was like, who the hell is this? That sounds like Warrant. And it was Warrant. And, Janie Lane, right?
Yeah.
He used to complain about how he wanted the band to be heavier and he wanted to do more songs in this direction. And the record company forced him to put out Cherry Pie, which is one of the most stereotypical hair metal albums you can imagine. But Uncle Tom's Cabin, again, to me, the heaviness starts in the riff, because the rock and metal in the 80s, so many fantastic shredding guitarists. You had the fantastic singers. The lyrical subject matter could be a little, twee sometimes. But Uncle Tom's Cabin's real serious, talking about serial killers and burying bodies in the well. And it's got that really awesome riff to it. Just a heavy song. And so not like anything else in the Warrant catalog. Now, they've already been mentioned, but I am going to Dokken. I love Dokken. George Lynch and Jeff Pilson are an amazing duo. They could easily have done the band without Don. Let's face it, the only thing that's not heavy in Dokken is Don's vocals, for which I have utter sympathy. I sing in a cover band. I do not have a heavy voice. If I tried to sing Metallica or something, it would sound pretty lame. And Don always said, hey, I've got a wimpy voice. This is how I sing. What do you want? I said, I sympathize. They had some fantastic songs. The whole album, Back for the Attack, is a fantastic heavy metal album. Yes. And my particular favorite song on it, there are a lot of heavy songs, but I'm going with an album track called Night by Night, which has a fantastic riff and my favorite George Lynch guitar solo. And that is really saying something, because that man laid down some crazy guitar solos. Still does. He plays the Dallas Guitar Show almost every year. He's amazing. But Dokken, I think, was another band that could have gone heavier, but after grunge came in, they kind of lost their way and sort of started chasing trends around and didn't know what they were doing. And the band got mad at Don for grabbing all the money. And, these things happen, right? That's the music industry.
Nice.
Well, I got one more.
Yeah.
So, the Baby Dokken, a band called XYZ. So, produced by Don Dokken, their self-titled album, they have this slamming track called Inside Out. Just look it up on YouTube, watch the video. It's got fantastic solos, amazing drum beat. The singer sounds amazing. I think they are purely a victim of timing. If they'd released that album in 1986, it would have been huge. But in 1989, people were already starting to move on to other forms of music.
Nice. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So I think kind of the central theme here is heaviness also, it comes from what you listen to last, right? If you're listening to like Vulgar Display of Power and then you put on Back for the Attack, it sounds pretty wimpy. If you're listening to just, Foreigner and then you put on Back for the Attack, it sounds like the heaviest thing you've ever heard. And there's just some fantastic heavy music throughout all of hair metal.
And I've heard a lot of good examples also of another form of heaviness is drum production, a crushing bass drum sound, a big, wet, huge snare drum sound. Elder, I thought of when you mentioned Keel. Keel hits me that way. Kiss has just a very strange drum sound that some people call massive, and other people will listen to the same song and call it small. It's hard to figure out Kiss, but they do have a weirdness with their drum sound too that can be overbearing. So that's another way to sound heavy.
Right.
Yeah.
I really thought about starting hair metal with Asylum, but that's an edge case for me because I don't think the music is pure hair metal yet, but the videos were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All Night, especially. I remember that was like,
and they're wearing the neon colors and
Yeah, and everybody's it's all shiny, and the women are dressed all shiny and shiny things, I think. And
Yeah, they're they've got the same clothes on as the guys.
yes.
Another thing that came out with some of these examples as well, another way to be heavy is we've talked about slow songs and fast songs, but there's this idea of the sinister or marauding riff. Like there's some really mean, menacing sounding riffs that are spread all across the hair metal canon. And there's a lot of great examples of that, which just sounds heavy because they kind of like sweep you up in the groove. They sound like a 3-beer Friday night kind of headbanging sort of thing because they've just got that mid pace, real sort of dark groove to them. Rat has a lot of songs like that, right? Lack of communication or even Round and Round in places. I mean, Rat just seems to have some big heft to them because of those Bow Hill productions as well, right?
Can I bring up a band that I think is important to this whole discussion, especially as we brought up grunge and so forth. But first, shameless plug for the show that Elder mentioned, 80s Forgotten Metal. I thought it was great. That's why I held up Black and Blue. That's a little teaser for that. But please watch that show because that was a really cool episode. But we need to talk about Mother Love Bone. And everyone wants to say Nirvana was the death knell for hair metal. You got to remember that in 1990, a year before Nevermind, Alice in Chains released their first album. And that's when you started to see the shift, especially an album like Slave to the Grind. The heaviness came in. There's a story of one of the Warrant band members walking through Columbia when Cherry Pie comes out and nothing but Warrant posters. He walks through when Dog Eat Dog comes out, nothing but Alice in Chains posters. So there was a shift there. But prior to that, Mother Love Bone is the next phase in hair metal. And Andrew Wood was a bona fide rock star had he not passed away early. He was David Bowie. He was Jim Morrison. He was David Lee Roth. And they had, they get lumped into alt metal, but, that's Faith No More, that's Living Color. It's alt metal is too broad. Mother Love Bone was an incredible band. And if Andrew Wood doesn't pass away and that band doesn't morph into Pearl Jam, I don't know how big grunge really becomes without that band. And more importantly, Alice in Chains starts out as Alice and Chains. And you can see Lane Staley. They were a hair metal band. So again, we want to always name check grunge as killing hair metal. Hair metal came out, grunge came out of hair metal. So it's sort of a misnomer that it was Nirvana that did this. One, hair metal did it to itself. Bands became Steel Panther before Steel Panther. They were a parody and didn't realize it. So anyway, that's my little dissertation. I just want to say
that's great. Good stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the first Alice in Chains album pretty much could be a hair metal album. I think it back in the day when those first grunge albums came out, it seemed new, especially to me who grew up in the 80s and wasn't familiar with all the 70s stuff. But nowadays, if you listen to the grunge thing, you wonder what the big deal was and why there was this rift, because the first Soundgarden albums don't sound too different. I mean, the guitars are more down-tuned, the lyrics are way different, and the moods are different, but the music is it's rocking and very out there. So, like how Chris Cornell is screaming throughout, he could have been a great hair metal singer. I think he isn't too far off, and that becomes obvious 30 years later. I think that the gap wasn't that big as it seemed back then.
And hair metal ran a cycle. It had its lifetime, and it wasn't like everybody that was into Warrant and Poison all of a sudden jumped over to Nirvana. They just moved on. They were older. They had jobs. They had families. They weren't buying a bunch of new music. The kids that were buying new music were buying grunge. So again, it phased itself out. It wasn't Nirvana that killed it. It was time to move on.
Right. Mm-hmm. I always say that musical cycles go about every 4 to 6 years, basically about the length of time that people are in junior high and high school. Because once you hit college, it's really only musical fanatics like us that are still buying a lot of new music. Maybe people are listening no one listens to the radio anymore. They're listening to whatever AI generated crap is number one on Spotify right now.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that.
Well, classic rock radio, they'll listen to maybe.
Yeah. Does that still exist?
Oh yeah. But there's a few around here in my area that play it. One of them concentrates on the 80s, and then there's one that's about like all of them. But it's just It's so funny how it's gotten so like many bands in the classic rock now considered classic rock that you only hear like the same songs from the same bands, you know, because there's so many that are considered classic rock now. You hear the same Nirvana songs named Stone Temple Pilots, the same Led Zeppelin, you know, it's you don't so
let's I know Martin's got a time limit. So before
Yeah,
we
let's wrap her
this
up.
one
I'm just a little worried about this thing spooling before my 6 o'clock, so I got to get it saved. So sure.
All right. Well, you know, we've had a good discussion on this, so I think we're going to leave it there. Everyone, feel free to leave your favorite heavy hair metal tracks in the comments. Join us. Consider checking out the Patreon situation. We'd love to see you. And thank you for spending a little time with us today. I hope we see you again real soon on the Contrarians. Ciao,
All
guys.
right. Thanks, folks. See you later.
Heavy.
Bye.
Bye now.
happy Thanksgiving.